Hello, and welcome to the Millennial Nutritionist Podcast. I'm Isla Garcia, master's degree of nutrition science and registered dietitian, and I'm going to make weight loss realistic, sustainable, and uncomplicated for your busy lifestyle. On this podcast, me and my team of registered dietitians will decipher the latest nutrition research, dissect fad diets, and discuss social media trends for you so you can feel confident knowing what to eat to achieve your health goals. Research suggests that most weight loss programs aren't successful, but my experience has taught me that this is not because the participants aren't committed. It's because those diets are designed by non-nutrition professionals and center around severe restrictions. We are here to provide the facts about the science of weight loss so you can have the success you want and continue living your best life. Welcome back to the Millennial Nutritionist Podcast. My name is Isla, your founder, CEO, and host of the Millennial Nutritionist. Today, we're going to talk about beef for protein. So protein is very important for weight loss, and animal protein is one of the easiest ways to meet your protein goals because it's typically the lowest amount of calories per gram of food item because it's an isolated source of just protein, pretty much. I do often get questions about sustainability and eating a lot of meat. So I wanted to bring on an expert to talk about this topic because I don't feel qualified answering all the intricate questions. Today I have on Dr. Wickersham, a professor of animal nutrition and Texas A&M University, to clear up some misconceptions about the beef industry. We're going to talk a bit about some sustainability conversation in the TV show Yellowstone, bust some myths about beef, and answer some of your questions. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Wickersham.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. So first, can you tell us why did you decide to pursue this area of study? Why the passion for beef cows? Why do you think why did you want to teach about it? Kind of tell us how you got here.
Okay, so I grew up on a ranch with a few cows, and I went off to college to actually be a lawyer. I decided kind of early in that process I didn't really want to be a lawyer, and I really liked animal nutrition because it combines science, so your basic biology, biochemistry, organic chemistry, and math. I've always liked math as well, and I really liked cows. I've enjoyed cows my entire life, and so it just kind of combined all those things together. And then I really wanted to become a professor because I like young people and I enjoy working with young people, teaching them about beef cattle nutrition. It's been a lot of fun doing that. And we still have a few cows outside of town, kind of as a hobby. So it's been good.
Nice, nice. Why do you feel like it's important that we continue to research beef in our food system?
I guess the biggest reason I feel like it's important that beef cattle are a part of our food system is beef cattle allow us to use sources of nutrients that we can't use. So beef cattle have a 4-chambered stomach, whereas we just have a 1-chambered stomach. And in the first 2 chambers, there's lots of microbes.
Mm-hmm.
And those microbes allow cattle to go out and consume grass and then convert that grass into products that you and I enjoy consuming, whether that's meat or milk. And I think by doing that, they really fill a unique niche in our food supply. So a lot of the United States, a lot of the world, we can't grow crops on, but we can grow grass. And by incorporating cattle, we can make better use of that land and the grass that grows on that land. So.
Interesting. Yeah, I have some MythBusters or some questions, and I think one of those kind of gets to that I didn't even think about, where somebody's kind of asking are cows using or eating things that humans can eat? And it kind of sounds like you're already answering that question, that no, they do have kind of a different purpose. We can't just eat the same things that they eat. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Right. And so basically, I mean, that's one of the values of cows if you compare them to other animal source proteins. So pigs and chickens have a more similar gastrointestinal tract to us, especially pigs, very similar.
Mm-hmm.
And so they can eat a diet that is consumable by people. You and I could consume a lot of the same things they eat. Whereas for the majority of a beef animal's life, they're consuming feed products that you and I can't consume. There's a small window there where we feed them corn, which you and I can consume. But from an amino acid standpoint, it's not all that valuable. A lot of calories in corn, but not a great source of essential amino acids to meet our requirements. So we feed that to the cattle. That really increases the value of that protein source for us.
Interesting. Okay. I was looking on your profile on the Texas A&M website, and it says that you direct research in forage utilization and nitrogen utilization. Can you even explain what that is?
Okay, so forage utilization is basically helping cows eat the grass better.
Uh-huh.
So for a long time, we've been working. It's one of those things like you go to graduate school and you're like, I'm going to do this. And you don't really realize what that's going to mean for the rest of your life. And so I went to graduate school to learn how to feed mature cows. And what we did work on there was on utilizing low quality forage, so forage with very little nitrogen, and we provide them a protein supplement, just like we might take a supplement, and we provide them a protein supplement, and that protein supplement really increases their ability to eat the grass. And so that they harvest more nutrients from it. It makes them more efficient. They can maintain body weight, body condition score, and have calves and take better care of those calves as a result of protein supplementation. And then I've spent the last basically 25 years of my life doing that. And so what the graduate students, we kind of work on three big areas. The two that we generally work on the most would be what kind of protein supplements can we give to the animal to improve forage utilization. So we try and look at byproducts from other industries that humans can't consume. So we've done a lot of work with like cottonseed products. Humans can't consume cottonseed products because it has some toxins. And then we've done some work with algae, leftover algae remnants from oil production, and then distillers' grains. And then most recently, we've been working with Texas A&M University on feeding black soldier fly larvae as a kind of non-conventional protein source, just to see if it works. And you can provide cattle just basically any source of protein, and they do really well. Now we're looking at two different types of cattle and how they utilize nitrogen. So since you're new to Texas, you might not have seen them, but some cows in Texas and other parts of the world are Bos indicus. So they have a hump in the long ears. And so they're really good at nitrogen metabolism. They can serve it better. So we're trying to figure out why. Because if we can figure out why they do better with nitrogen, then maybe we can help all cattle do better with nitrogen.
Why is that even important? Like, is it important for our nutrition or is it important for their lives? Can you say that again?
Yeah, so it's going to be important for their lives. It allows us to meet their requirements better. The reason it's important to us is if you look at sustainability in general, we talk about kind of the three pillars. There's the social or societal, the environment, and then economic. And so when we look at nitrogen, nitrogen really touches two of those, the environment and the economics. So supplemental nitrogen sources are expensive for producers. And then there's an environmental cost to excessive nitrogen excretion. So we're trying to reduce that. And then you could even tie the societal thing there, because if we can feed less nitrogen, we can decrease the cost. Beef becomes an option for more consumers.
Gotcha. Okay. So already kind of talking about the sustainability piece. I love it. I had a random question that just popped in my head too. Just so people can kind of appreciate what people in your industry do, or even just like the fact that we have animal scientists, because some people not even know that. For the students that you teach, like what do they typically go on to do? All I normally think of are like vets. Is that common, or is it really just they go on to do more research too?
So most of the students will come to our major. One of the things that's kind of crazy is people think it's not, it's like a small thing. And so like the class I teach in undergraduates, we have about 550 students take animal nutrition a year. There's lots of reasons they take it. It is a prerequisite to get into vet school. So everybody who goes to vet school has to have animal nutrition. Makes sense, right? We have a lot of students who will take it even though they're going to med school, because you can learn a lot about the anatomy and physiology and how digestion and absorption works. So we kind of have vets. We have a lot of doctors and dentists and PAs and nurses, and then kind of the other careers available in animal science. Just then go to graduate school, get PhDs, do consulting type things. But a lot of them actually go out in the industry, run their own ranches, run their own operations, and they have to have a basic understanding of how nutrition works, because a lot of the cost of animal production is feed. Feed's relatively expensive, and that's what we spend a lot of money on. So knowing the best way to feed has the potential to help their animals perform better, right? Just like I'm sure you tell your clients, if they consume a better diet, they're going to have better, healthier lives. And the same thing with cattle and horses and all the animals. If we feed them an appropriate diet, they have healthier lives.
We're highlighting a lot of protein information for you for the month of April, so I wanted to include an ad that can make protein intake easier for you. I'm talking about Kevin's Natural Foods. I'm really excited about this ad because it's a product that I already recommend to clients anyway. I reached out to see if we could get a discount code for you and an affiliate code for me, and they were all on board. So here we go. We're all about whole foods at The Millennial Nutritionist, as in food in their most natural form, and Kevin's Natural Foods really fit that criteria. They offer pasta meal kits, heat and eat sides like mashed cauliflower, and what I normally recommend to clients, they're refrigerated chicken entrees like Thai, coconut, and Korean barbecue chicken. These are great for weight loss because they are an easy protein source that you could buy from the store and take home and just heat up. I know that a lot of you struggle with having enough time to make those important high protein meals, so check out Kevin's Natural Foods to solve that problem. If you come home at the end of the day and you just really don't want to cook something from scratch, this could be a really easy thing to just pull out of the fridge, add a vegetable and maybe a whole grain to it, and that is good enough for your meal. Enjoy the rest of your evening and go to bed. You can find Kevin's Natural Foods at a lot of grocery stores, Whole Foods being one of them, but if you order online and use the code TMN at checkout, you'll receive 10% off your first purchase. For our pop culture article or conversation, the whole reason I thought of this topic to cover was Yellowstone. So I don't know how many other people watch it. I took a pause from watching it. And then when I moved to Texas, I was reinvigorated because I don't know about where you live, but up here, it's everybody's obsessed with Yellowstone. Do you ever hear about it or no? You just so outside of that sphere?
The students are real fired up about it. They really like it. They let me know about it and they always want me to watch it. And I've never really got into it.
Yeah, I think it might start to fizzle out because apparently I don't think Kevin Costner's coming back. So maybe it was good that you're not watching it now. But there was a recent storyline that kind of is still going on that piqued my interest as a dietitian. The main character, Kevin Costner, who's playing the head ranch man, John Dutton, has a girlfriend who is an animal rights activist. And this is problematic because John Dutton is the head, beef rancher. And so a lot of times they have these little micro conversations that never really go on because it's not the whole plot of the story, but where they'll get into kind of scuttles or arguments about why the animal rights activist girlfriend thinks that it's so bad that they're eating meat or anything animal product related. And I didn't know I dropped some clips in there and didn't know if you had any initial thoughts about any of the conversations that they were having. There's one conversation about how she wants to eat wheatgrass. And they're well, just go chop up the grass that the cows eat. Is that even the same thing, or any thoughts on any of the clips in general?
Well, not to my knowledge, I've not consumed wheatgrass, but cows do consume wheat grass. It's grass. In certain parts of the country, we can grow wheat for humans to consume. But during the winter while it's growing, in the spring while it's growing, you can actually graze cattle, and it's kind of a dual purpose crop. So then you pull the cattle off and the wheat grows, and then you harvest the wheat for human consumption. That's not what you're really asking me about. But of the clips you sent me, I think all of the conversations are good and they make some good points and some things to think about.
Mm-hmm.
It's been funny. The students have talked a lot I hadn't watched it or heard about it until you sent me the clips and I watched them about the, how many moles and and all that stuff. And so the students have it makes sense now because for the last, little while, they've been talking about that in class, how big does the animal have to be for you to care?
Yeah.
And so, because as you can imagine, most of the students are pro consuming beef in our department, but there are a few who aren't. So, I think that's a good point. I think one of the things that people forget is from an animal welfare standpoint, it's really important for beef producers like myself. And then from a research standpoint, we want the animals to have good lives. One, because I genuinely like cows, themselves. And then also from a more pragmatic standpoint, they perform better and do better if they're in a good environment where they're not stressed, where they don't feel unsafe and their nutrient requirements are met. They're going to be healthier, perform better, grow better. And ultimately that translates into better performance for the producer. And then I think some of the comments they made about I don't know where wheatgrass comes into a human diet. Maybe you could tell me, is it really a Jamba Juice, like they said in the clip, or, and I don't know if it's the same wheatgrass, right? But alfalfa sprouts, it's the same alfalfa. We just, it grows a lot longer and we feed the entire crop, not just these little sprouted seeds. The other thing is, I guess, some of those components you can consume in their young and mature stage, and you can derive some nutritional value out of it.
Mm-hmm.
But most of it's cellulose, and we don't have the capacity to digest and utilize cellulose.
So then is there an argument to be made that it's better used to allow it to grow and let the cow eat it, and then we basically eat the beef?
So I think the amount of wheatgrass that's consumed by humans is insignificant relative to the amount of grass consumed by humans or by cattle.
Uh-huh.
So there is a lot more value in allowing a human to consume it. It's like we talk about in class a lot. No one on their way to class stops and eats the grass in the yard,
Mm-hmm.
a yard outside the building. They're going to eat something that's their bodies, the physiology of their bodies are designed to utilize, and we're just not good grass utilizers.
Right. And that's one thing that I wish I got that clip, because that's honestly the clip I wanted to get the comment on the most. Is there's one part where Beth, who is the daughter, she's like the sassy redhead, in one of the clips, she's making the argument that we don't have a 4-chamber stomach like animals that eat grass do. And I never took an animal nutrition class. So can you explain like what is the difference then? Because she kind of makes the argument that we're not really supposed to be eating the same foods they eat. Is that true? Or what do you think
That's
that
true.
means?
That's true. So if you look at anybody who consumes a large amount of grass or roughage, forage, things you would graze, there's two big groups. And the first group would be ruminants. And so that would be like sheep, goats, cattle, giraffes, deer, elk, bison, and think of cowish kind of animals.
Mm-hmm.
They have 4 compartments, like we said earlier. In the first 2 compartments, there is a lot of microbial activity,
Mm-hmm.
bacteria, protozoa, and fungi. And they're going to use fermentation to digest the forage. Grains have starch, right?
Mm-hmm.
And starch has alpha 1,4 bonds, whereas grasses have cellulose.
Mm-hmm.
Cellulose has beta bonds, and humans, mammals in and of themselves, don't have the enzymes to digest the beta bonds. And the cow uses microbes. The microbes produce the enzymes to digest the beta bonds.
Interesting.
And so, like, you literally can't utilize that cellulose. You have no real capacity. You can in your large intestine a little bit, but it's still really limited, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have the microbes. And the other alternative would be like to be a horse. Horses aren't ruminants, but they can graze.
Mm-hmm.
And they exist on fermentation in their large intestine and cecum, but they have a huge large intestine and cecum, whereas we don't. Maybe like half the listeners just tuned out when I said beta bonds. But,
No, I think that is interesting, because I was going to ask that. I'm like, isn't it all just come down to fiber? But it sounds like you're saying it is still different. Like, even though we can't digest all the fiber, there's still some more useful to us compared to like, we can't just go out and eat grass for fiber.
Fiber in us isn't really digestible until we get to the large intestine.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't provide any calories, which is one of the reasons you would recommend people consume it, right? Is because it makes you full. It makes you feel
It's
full.
like a filler. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's not really doing anything. It's helping your large intestine be healthier and make you feel better theoretically. And so, whereas they're actually going to digest and utilize the fiber. And the interesting thing we talk about a lot in class is what we consider high fiber for humans. When we feed it to cattle, we consider that low fiber.
Because they can use it all, unlike we can. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So like we would consider oatmeal like a relatively high fiber source, whereas oats would be about as good as it ever gets for a cow. That's like the most energy, the most starch, the most everything. Whole grains, when we consume whole grains, that's actually high fiber for us, but for them, that'd be low fiber.
Interesting.
Like if you look at grass, like bad grass, it'd be 80%, 75, 80% fiber.
Interesting. No, that's a lot. I feel like that's getting to the whole point of like, I feel like so many people think that we just have cows to like go to like Brazilian steakhouses and stuff. Like they're not really a part of like a real purpose. And I feel like I'm starting to understand that there is like this whole chain of purpose for us to utilize their nutrition.
The other thing we do with them that a lot of people don't recognize is we feed them byproducts from like when we make high fructose corn syrup or when we make ethanol for our cars. There's leftover parts of the corn kernel that we don't really have a lot of use for. And so we feed those to cattle. There are byproducts from cotton that we feed to cattle. It's a way for us to get rid of these large quantities of byproducts in a way that produces something of value for humans.
Because where else would that go? Yeah.
One of the things is you could like burn it, but that's not great either. Or use it as a heat source. But it's good for the cows. It's really great nutrition.
Interesting. Okay, well, there's a lot of good stuff already. I feel like we're going to kind of dip into these questions. We'll kind of like getting
Okay.
into I found some MythBusters that would be interesting because I feel like that's all when it comes to like beef. And I definitely need to find a dairy person. So if you know a dairy person, I feel like dairy's worse than beef with all these MythBusters. But I found some common ones that I do hear a lot. When I constantly recommend, I mean, I recommend eating protein because I'm animal products for protein because I just find it's easiest for people who are on the go. You can just get so much more for your bang for your buck, stuff like that. But I get a lot of these questions when I recommend it. So one of the first ones is, I feel like the biggest one, like, what about organic free range? Like, which one should people be picking? Like, is this healthier versus like you just go to Aldi and buy the most basic, cheapest cut you can find? Like, kind of like what really, can you even maybe just explain like what really is organic free range beef?
So basically, there's different methods of production, and
Mhm.
I'm supportive of all methods of production in terms of like if someone wants to produce an organic beef product and someone wants to purchase it, I think that's a really good thing. I think it's good for the beef industry. I think it's good for the consumers. Uh, Nutritionally, the biggest difference in beef would be how lean it is. And so how much marbling or how much fat is contained in that product.
Mhm.
And so kind of an interesting point is most people want to consume high-end beef products, right? Like the prime steaks would be the greatest value because they have the best eating experience, the best taste, the most tender, the best flavor. Um, but sometimes they generally have more fat, right? That's what makes them taste good. That way it makes them more tender. So really, like for me, I don't have a problem with that. Like I think it's good to consume fat,
Mhm.
like everything in moderation to some extent. Um, so the nutritional differences between those products is the degree of leanness. And you can have lean products in all kinds of different production systems, and you can have more fat products in all kinds of production systems. And so really what you're looking for is how lean of product you want to consume.
Okay. So are you saying that's a bigger difference than looking for organic versus free range, or are you connecting the
Right.
fat
I'm
content?
saying, well, the organic free range is maybe depends organic, not so much, but the free range or the grass fed beef is generally a little leaner because it's
Oh,
harder to get them fat. It's harder to get the degree of marbling that we would need to get to like prime in those systems. Some people can do it and they do it really well, but in general, it's a little leaner. And so there's some value in that if you want to have a leaner cut of beef. But there are also other lean cuts of, I mean, there's just as many, I'm sad I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but there's lots of lean cuts of beef from conventional production too.
okay.
Uh, but I guess the biggest thing from a health standpoint that I would look at is if I was trying to reduce the amount of fat intake, how lean it is.
Mhm.
But when you look at beef, like the amino acids that are there, those are really fixed by biology, and it doesn't really matter the system we produce them in, right? Like the muscle is the muscle, and it's going to contain the amino acids and the protein and the iron and the zinc and all of those things. The only thing we really change in the animal nutritionally is how much fat there is in the animal. And you can
Gotcha.
change the composition. So you can read some things where they can change the composition of fat a little bit and get a little more omega-3s or less omega-6s um, in grass-fed beef, but it's not enough to really make a difference in your life, right? As you know, if you want to really consume omega-3s, fish are the way to go, or supplements are the way to consume omega-3s. It's hard to get them in a diet that doesn't involve marine sources of lipids.
Okay.
So
Gotcha.
I don't know if
Gotcha.
that answered your question.
Yeah, I feel like it's telling people that it's fine. Like we don't need to be stressing out about all that part about beef in general.
And I think if you want to consume, like sometimes consumers want to like consume a story.
Yeah.
They want
They
to
want to
know
know
who
what's like
their beef
dancing
or
around out there.
right. They just want to know what's going on, and I think that's a fine thing. But everybody has a choice to make, right?
Mhm.
Those products, the organic or the grass fed or whatever, generally cost more.
What about land that is used for cattle could be used for growing produce? What do you have to say about that? Is that a myth? Is that true? What do you think?
So I would say that's generally a myth. Most of the land where we grow cattle, most of the grassland can't really be utilized for anything else. The reason it can't really be used for anything else is generally marginal soil quality. The weather doesn't work well for growing other crops. And then also terrain. It's too rocky, too hilly, too swampy, too whatever.
Mhm.
So can't necessarily grow crops there. And then the environment, like winter doesn't work well or those kind of things to grow produce. The one area where we kind of compete would be with corn. And so we feed corn to cattle. We feed relatively small amount of the U.S. corn production goes to feeding cattle. A lot of it goes to feeding pigs and chickens and used for fuel and other industrial uses. So most of the land we couldn't even grow crops on anyway that cattle are on for most of their lives. And then a small amount of land is used to grow corn. The one thing I would say about even that small amount of land used to grow corn is a lot of the produce crops or the crops we might be interested in consuming, like fruits and vegetables that we might actually want to consume, generally doesn't grow well in those environments where we can grow large amounts of corn. So one time we had this interesting discussion. If people wanted to consume those crops, there would be an economic incentive to produce those crops, and the corn farmers would grow those crops, right? Like if they could grow them and if they could make money doing it, they would do it. So I don't think there's as much competition between cattle and humans as people think there are. We did this project on protein upcycling, and so that's kind of a phrase we coined to talk about what beef cattle do. They take low quality proteins and they bring a lot of value to it. And what we did is we looked at the corn that we feed to beef animals. We kind of did one beef animal and said, what if I took that corn I fed to a beef animal and used that to meet the amino acid requirements of children? How many kids could I feed? And we came up with somewhere around 3 to 4 kids that could meet their amino acid requirements for a year. If I took that same corn and fed it to a steer, I could meet the protein requirements for somewhere around 17 children for 1 year. And so you basically get 4 to 5 times the amount of high quality protein out of that as you would if you just gave the kids the corn. And the challenge with giving them the corn, as you know, is it contains a lot of calories. Like as we started the podcast, you said you really like to recommend beef because not very many calories, but a great source of amino acids. And so that's what I think. They are competing by consuming corn, but we're getting a lot of value.
Yeah, I believe it. We did have to, in my metabolism class in grad school, we did have to do like a project kind of like that where we were trying to make like a little self-sustainable little plot. And we couldn't do it without doing some sort of animals, even if it was just mealworms. Because like you said, it's impossible to meet all of your requirements with like 1 little acre of land. So I totally believe it.
They give a lot of nutrient cycling, so it's a good thing. Yeah, sorry.
No, you're fine. The last Mythbuster I have is the beef industry uses old science technology. This is the way of the past. Do you think that is a myth? What is your opinion on that comment?
I think that's probably the most interesting myth you bring, because generally what we kind of get beat up on, or a lot of questions about, questions would be a better way to phrase that, what we get a lot of questions about is why we use science and technology to produce beef, because sometimes consumers aren't comfortable with that. And they would like us to go more to a free range or a grass-fed beef product, which would actually be an older technology.
Oh, yeah.
In the last few years, the beef industry has been really concerned with sustainability, or people have been concerned about beef industry sustainability. And the beef industry was not consciously trying to improve sustainability over the last 50 years, but we did some retroactive look. We looked backwards. What we found is the beef industry has really improved sustainability over time. And that's by implementing more precise diets, better health management, reproductive technologies. So like selecting better animals, getting them bred more, and then just genetic selection and nutrition, and just in general, taking a better care of the animal, better care of the environment, and applying those technologies and science. We've really improved beef production. And I think that's something consumers don't necessarily understand, is that the way we raise beef now by using science and technology has really improved sustainability and should help consumers feel better about the beef they're consuming, like that it has a smaller environmental footprint. It's doing less to impact the environment than it did 20 years ago, 50 years ago, or 100 years ago.
Yeah, could you give like a specific example or detail on that? Because I probably should have asked another question about more like specific like beef sustainability. Like what is a way that like we're more sustainable now eating beef versus 10 years ago?
So the way that's probably easiest for the consumers to understand is we've decreased methane production per unit of beef pretty dramatically over the last 50 years.
Mm-hmm.
And the US is the lowest. If you look at the intensity, the kilograms of methane per kilogram of beef produced, we have the lowest intensity, or one of the lowest intensities. And
You
if we
know,
went back to more of a grass-fed system, that would go back up.
oh, okay. I was going to ask, like, how do they get there? So it goes back to that animal nutrition, like what they're feeding them now.
Yeah, it's animal nutrition and then selection and then just improvements in the whole value chain.
Interesting. So are you saying there's an argument to be made that free range is like less sustainable? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, there are aspects. So sustainability is a balancing act.
Uh-huh.
And so you have give and take on different things, right? We were talking about protein upcycling before. The more grass they consume, the more protein they're producing that doesn't directly compete with humans. But when you consume more grass, you actually produce more methane.
Gotcha. Okay.
So like we have to, and if you consume more grass, you're going to use more land.
Mm-hmm.
So land use kind of goes up. So it's like trying to find a balance. And that's why I said earlier, I think, consumers are attracted to certain types of production processes, right? Someone might want to consume grass-fed products.
Mm-hmm.
So those might cost a little more or have a little different cost, but I think they should have the freedom to choose that.
Who is responsible for like determining the sustainability or improving the sustainability? Does it come down to the farmer? Is it coming down to the scientist, the food industry? Who is that?
So I don't think it was now it is a conscious effort to really try and quantify it and look for ways we can improve that.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, it's all the producers of the beef industry in the United States working together to make a more sustainable industry. So if I, at the cow-calf level, take a better care of my cows and then provide better calves to the stocker or the feedlot operator, they can be more sustainable. They can improve their production practices. So it's everybody along the entire value chain doing their part to make things better.
Okay.
So I don't think it's any one person waking up one day and saying we're going to be sustainable. I think it's everybody making their operation more sustainable. We did another project a while ago, and we looked at different mitigation strategies for sustainability, ways to improve sustainability. And every one of the ways to improve sustainability also made producers more money. And
Interesting.
more profitable. So there's incentives for all the ways that improve sustainability, also increase profitability. And so there's an incentive for the producer to make a more sustainable product.
That's awesome. Because I feel like so often I hear that's like counterintuitive. Like so many companies now are like making a product and then like buying these credits to like also put a tree up in the Amazon or something like that. But you're saying for like beef that it is one and the same.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And another thing to think about with beef is it's kind of part of a natural cycle anyway, right? We've had large herbivores grazing on grasslands since before people. Beef animals are doing that. It's a large part of the beef production system is very natural and replacing large herbivores.
Moving on to the audience questions. I'll just have two here. So the first one, I feel like you maybe kind of hit on both of these, but maybe just for clarity again. Can you speak to grass-fed versus grain-fed beef? Does that go back to the free range or no, that's different?
That's the same.
Oh,
They're basically the same. I would say, cattle aren't really, they're confined. We put them in feedlots, but they're not confined like maybe like a chicken. So grass-fed would be, when you said free range, I interpreted it as grass-fed. So
yeah, I don't know. So I don't even
no,
really
it's
know what that
like,
means. I probably should.
but it would be animals that are finished on grass versus animals that are finished in a feedlot.
Gotcha.
Are you good with that terminology, or do you want feedlot defined? Or
Yeah, maybe define it because I don't know what that means either.
okay, so a feedlot is, so if we look at beef production, we kind of have three phases. We have the cow-calf phase, which is the phase you see when you drive around Texas, Oklahoma, or anywhere, and you see cows out grazing and they have their calves with them. That'd be the cow-calves. The calves live there with their mom for about 7 months. And then sometimes the calves will go to a stalker phase, which is where they graze by themselves without their mothers. So they're weaned, they graze around, and then we put them in a feedlot. And a feedlot's where they're finished. And so they grow and we finish them. We allow them to grow rapidly, and then they deposit fat. And that's where we see an increase in marbling. And so this is where we generally feed the corn to the animal. And so a grass finished system would get rid of the feedlot phase and the animal would grow to more grass. Earlier you asked, is that less sustainable? Well, one of the challenges with grass-fed systems is in most cases the animal is in those a lot longer than they would be in the feedlot.
Mm.
And so they're going to produce more methane over that time point. They're going to consume more feed over that time point. So it requires more land, but they're also different things. So does that make sense?
Yeah, I think my follow-up question to that is a really basic question that I don't know the answer to. Is the methane the biggest argument for eating beef as less sustainable, or are there other facets of it?
I think it's methane, water use, land use, and then there's the animal welfare health thing. The challenge with the methane, in my mind, is methane's part of the natural carbon cycle.
Mm-hmm.
And so methane actually, in contrast to CO2, like from your car, if you like get oil and burn oil, right, you've released CO2 that had previously been trapped in the ground. When cows produce methane, that was CO2, that was carbon from a plant. The plant captured the carbon and the cow releases the carbon as methane. And in about 12 years, that methane is converted back to CO2. By that time point, it's back to CO2. And then a plant can catch it again. And then the cow consumes it again.
Mm.
So there's like a natural carbon cycle there that a lot of people don't realize. They think the cows are just producing methane, and the amount of methane keeps growing up.
Yeah, that's what I pictured.
Yeah, it's
exploding.
much flatter than that. It's much more, if you have a constant population of cows, it's much flatter. Whereas if you keep driving your car every day, it keeps going straight up. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Gotcha. Okay.
But people just understand the methane thing and it gets talked a lot about. So I think that's why we talk about it. And a lot of people don't know that the beef industry and ruminant production in general has been trying to reduce methane for as long as we've known about it, because it represents an energy cost. So the cow loses energy.
Mm-hmm.
So from a beef standpoint, it's better for us to try and reduce methane as much as possible. And so we're actively, like a lot of people are actively doing research and trying to figure out how we can decrease methane. And we've been effective at some level in decreasing methane, but we'd like to be more effective.
What do cows eat? I don't know if we generally answer that question. And then do they eat food that humans could eat?
So cows do eat food that humans can eat, and that would generally be in the form of corn.
Mm-hmm.
And it's different than the corn that you and I consume, right? It's field corn. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not like corn on the cob or, it's different. It's produced mainly as animal feed or to make ethanol from that corn. And that would be generally consumed during the feedlot phase. But other than that, they don't really compete. And their competition, the amount of corn we use, and since 2006 has really gone down because we're feeding more and more byproducts to cattle.
Is this one okay? I saw this random article. I feel like when I was in grad school about cows getting fed Skittles. Did you hear about that? Is that real?
Yeah, actually, we did a podcast, like our radio or podcast interview.
Really?
I did eating Skittles. So the Skittles they got spilled on the side of the road, so they couldn't use them for humans.
Uh-huh.
And so they fed them to the cattle.
And would that do anything, like giving them extra sugar, or do the way they process it?
So you would have to feed it slowly because the rumen isn't really designed to consume large amounts of sugar because the fermentation will go crazy. But you can feed bakery waste. There's lots of products that can be fed to cattle that we wouldn't consume. When I was growing up, we fed onions, like waste onions and waste carrots and waste potatoes. So instead of just throwing them away, we'd feed them. They make sugar from beets. They feed a lot of beet pulp in places. So there's lots of micro areas where there are just supply of nutrients that you wouldn't normally think of being fed to cattle that we can feed to cattle.
Interesting. It's making me want to find. I try to compost, but I live in an apartment, so I don't even know where it goes. I feel like it'd be much cooler if I could just give it all to a cow or something.
Yeah, that doesn't work. I mean, they're not good with some things, so
Yeah.
we can feed them the bakery waste.
Yeah.
We can feed them.
Well, to kind of wrap it all up, if somebody is really, really still concerned with wanting, they feel okay with eating beef now, but they still want to worry about the sustainability, what is one actual tip they can do to try to be more sustainable with eating beef, if that is even something they can do?
I think the biggest thing you can do to try and be more sustainable with beef consumption, not waste it.
Mm.
So when we look at sustainability, one of the biggest things we have in the United States is food wastage.
Mm-hmm.
And this is with, any animal source. An animal basically gave its life to make that food product.
Right.
And so it's up to us to honor that and consume it if it was made for that purpose. And then the other thing, that's just in general, one of the advantages we have is from a food waste standpoint, we do a really good job consuming meat and not wasting it like we do vegetables because it's expensive, right? If you buy a steak, you're going to eat it. You're not just going to let it sit in the bottom of the fridge and go to waste. So I think for the consumer, that would be the biggest thing they could do. And then maybe the other thing would be the packaging and the shipping and all of those things involved in getting the actual meat product to them. It's not something we often think about, but I heard some advertisements for that, well, there should be these small amounts of meat. It's like, well, it's much more effective for you to go to the grocery store and pick up the meat than it is to get small shipments of meat to your house.
Oh, that's a good point. Good to know. And those are both things that are very easy and affordable, I feel like, too, because that's the biggest thing when it comes to sustainability. A lot of things are perceived as super expensive. So I think those are really good tips. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I think this was really informative, even especially for me. I didn't realize how much I didn't know on this topic either. So thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Wickersham. And I just want to plug our email newsletter. Please make sure to sign up. If you go on our website, it's the first thing that kind of pops up on the home screen. You'll get kind of plugged in to all things millennial nutritionist if you like this content. But thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to the Millennial Nutritionist Podcast. For daily weight loss tips and nutrition information, you can find us on Instagram at the.millennial.nutritionist and on TikTok at millennial.nutritionist. If you find this information helpful, please subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend who needs encouragement on their health journey. See you in the next episode.